Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, back with another patch rundown. Yes, I know we missed the Latch patch rundown, but we're back with another patch rundown. It is patch TFT 14.5. Now, meta-wise, we're actually in a really good spot. So, lots of comps are doing well. There's lots of things that are successful. So overall, this is aiming to be a pretty small patch in terms of like champion and trait balance and things like that. Obviously, we don't want to shift things too much. We've seen the emergence of like a new Bastion Morgana comp that's on the rise, but overall, still a lot of things you can play. That being said, there is one big thing coming this patch that will sound like a lot, but we're hoping actually has very little impact as well. But it's something that we want to do. You can check out an article about this as well. But let's dive right into it. We're going to kick right off with the biggest thing that you can expect this patch. And that is that some of the items, I believe about 6 of them, are getting reworked slightly. Now, this rework is actually to kind of get us ready for the next set. There are some things coming in the next set that we want to get the item system sort of in a better spot for. But overall, like I said, hopefully the impact of these isn't that big. So let's talk, for example, Guardbreaker is going to become Striker's Flail. And overall, same stats, although no AP anymore. So this will help it be a little bit more of a universal item. It's got attack speed, crit, damage, amp, and health. And then every time you critically strike, whether it be an auto attack or a spell, you'll gain 5% damage amp, stacking up to 4 times. So the maximum here is actually a little bit more damage amp than it was before as well. But overall, this should make it a little less, I have to hope they cast a shield, and I have to hope they AoE and proc that shield. And now it can just be good damage amp if you build crit, should pair really well with IE, Jeweled Gauntlet, Executioner, stuff like that. So again, you'll build it in a lot of the exact same places you were before. Should barely notice the change. Should be a little bit better on AD champions. Good stuff. Ginsu's. This is the biggest change, if you will. I already put out a video on this that kind of shows the difference before and after. But overall, you should feel pretty comfortable still building Ginsu's like you did before. The only difference now is it's not going to hyper synergize with people who already have really high attack speed or proc on attack, things like Zeri or Jinx or Vayne. And it should be a little bit better on people who like have to stop and cast their spell or have a lower base attack speed. So like Senna benefits, Aphelios benefits, even Jinx to some extent. And so my expectation is for Ginsu's is that actually we'll see it built a little bit more, but usually only 1 and not 2. But take a look and let us know what you think. Next up is Spirit Visage. This is replacing Redemption. Redemption was a weird supporty item that actually healed both the wearer and the people around it. And again, we're trying to make our core item system mostly selfish stuff. So the big buff here is that Redemption didn't give you any durability for the first 5 seconds until it procced once. Now you just get that 10% durability up front. So that's going to last the same. And then you're going to regenerate health every second rather than every 5 seconds, which means you'll actually not miss out on value, which is usually a good thing. And it also gains a little bit of health. Overall, it's a tiny nerf to the item because, again, you're not getting that AoE heal. But selfishly, it should be a small bit better. This is one that my shot call is it'll be a tiny, like, neutral. It's not going to, like, wow anybody. But overall, it's what we want it to be. And if we have to buff it, we will. But, yeah, this should be good on people like Cho'Gath, 3-star Braum, etc. All right, Kraken's Fury. This is probably the biggest change of all the items as far as like completely different function. Like this one is a very different function. Hurricane was all about having really high base AD and then shooting extra bolts off that kind of just fed people mana or really didn't kill anyone. And so that's completely gone. Now the item is actually about gaining stacking AD. So it's kind of like the Archangels of AD, except instead of over time, it's on auto attack, which does synergize with doing lots of auto attacks. So there's one really good user this set, which is Zeri. Zeri should be pretty good with this item, especially over time. But overall, actually, a lot of the users you would expect to be good in this set, people like Vayne or Aphelios, already have a bunch of AD from their traits. So like Marksman gives AD, Slayer gives AD. Kog'Maw is another one that can use this kind of well. But overall, I actually expect this to be kind of built a little low. Now, I know when Dishsoap looked at these, he thought this was very, very strong. So we'll see if that ends up being correct. But overall, this is, again, an item that's meant to be sort of a stacking, over time so that by the end of the fight, you're doing a lot of damage. Zeri kind of being the big user of this. All right, Void Staff. This is Static Shiv was this really weird item that like you kind of felt bad putting on your main carry. It always felt like you knew you were missing out on damage, but you always needed it. And it had this whole like do extra 30 damage that had this really cool fantasy of like, if I have a lot of attack speed, I can do Pikachu builds. But we've had to move away from that. And so we'll talk about Shiv a little later. But we wanted to get Void Staff to be an item that can provide that shred while also not feeling like crap to put on your main carry. And so overall, it's very similar. It's got some more AP, so you lose the proc, and then it shreds. So pretty simple here. My expectation is that you still won't see this on a lot of main carries. It's almost going to get played exactly the same as before, right? Like if you're playing a brand comp, Ziggs will have this. That'll be pretty common. But you're not going to see a lot of, main carries with it, but it won't feel bad if you have to, right? And so if you end up with like a brand that has Shojin, JG, and this, it's going to be okay, and so that's kind of the idea here. Lastly is Sterix Gauge. This one got a very slight change. When it procced before, you would get like some health and AD. And we took a look at this item, and if you saw the preview actually had it with Omnivamp, but we've taken that out because we found with the Omnivamp it just became a little too similar to Bloodthirster. So when we looked at Sterix Gauge and Bloodthirster, what we decided is that Bloodthirster is the slightly more defensive option where you can like heal infinitely, but it'll give you less offensive power. Sterix Gauge is the like, I've already got the healing covered somewhere else. I want lots of offensive power, but still survivability. So 40 base AD, which is really good for a melee champion. So this is going to be good on someone like a melee Renekton, for example. And then 300 health. And then at 60% health, you're going to get a giant shield that's essentially going to keep you alive for a good amount of time. It will decay over 6 seconds, but it's a bigger shield than Bloodthirster. And so again, you're not going to get the Omnivamp, but you're going to get more offensive power and more survivability. So if you've got like a melee glass cannon, maybe someone like a Graves after he gets some buffs, could be good in this set. But this should be a melee item that should help in the future and have a little bit clearer role than it did in the past. Now with these changes, we also added some new artifacts. First off is because Spirit Visage is now a core item, we removed Anima Visage from the artifact system. But we did feel like we wanted to replace it with a new tank item. And so now we have the Indomitable. Now, if you remember from the anomaly in the previous set, there was that really cool one where you didn't move and you could pull people towards them. This is similar. You get 400 health, 20 armor and MR, and then you also gain 10% max health on top of that. So a lot of health, stun immunity, so you can't be stunned, very good. And then you always pull your current target into melee range, which is neat. Now, the anomaly locked you in place and created some pretty silly shenanigans where you would just put them in the back line. We did kind of want to remove a little bit of those, I'll call them Leduc shenanigans. And so the character can still move just very slowly. So there you go. It's pretty fun though. I think it's going to be pretty powerful. All right, Flicker Blade. If you're somebody who's like, no, I get the Ginsu's thing. I get your logic, but like the old Ginsu's was where it was at. Flicker Blade is the old Ginsu's essentially, except even more powerful. It starts with 15% attack speed instead of 10. Ginsu's used to give 5 attack speed per auto. This gives 8, so it will ramp up even quicker. And every 5 attacks also grant 4 AD and 5 AP. So this thing can ramp up. If you have a ramping fantasy, this is your item. I think this is going to be one that you're going to pick on 2-1 if you see it, and you're going to know what you're building and have some pretty powerful highs, even higher than the old Ginsu's before. Should be fun. All right, Static Shiv. Static Shiv, as I mentioned, back in the day, you had this really cool fantasy, right? Pikachu Zaya builds in set 3, where if you had a bunch of attack speed, you could like shock down the entire enemy team, and it was kind of fun. But because we kept moving away from that to make it a more flexible item, we lost that. We lost that spark. And as I've said before, artifacts are where we're supposed to have these sharp, unique fantasies. And so Pikachu Shiv is back. This item is focused entirely on if you have a lot of attack speed, you're going to do a lot of damage. And so every third attack, we'll deal 30 plus 40% of the holder's bonus ability power as additional damage. And so if you build like this plus Ginsu's, which has some AP, on something like a set 13 Kog'Maw, for example, this thing's going to be sparking and it's going to be hitting pretty hard. This set, I think Twisted Fate is going to be the best user of this. Ginsu's Static Shiv, Twisted Fate can do some silly stuff. But yeah, should be pretty cool. And then lastly is Titanic Hydra. Don't let this item fool you. This one's tricky, and a lot of people didn't quite see this right. This item says 300 health, 15 AD, 15 attack speed, so it's definitely an offensive item on someone like Renekton, for example. Pretty obvious. Attacks deal 3% of the holder's max health, plus 8% of their AD as bonus physical damage to the target and adjacent enemies. Now, when a lot of people see this item, they're like, ooh, big health people, right? Like, I'm going to put this on my Dr. Mundos or your Cho'Gaths. That's true, but the thing to remember is there's a certain class of champion that has very high AD and high health. 3-star range champions. The biggest one here is Senna. This item is amazing on Senna. 3-star Vayne also can do some pretty insane stuff with this, with Slayer going. But because it's getting percentage of their AD, not just their health, and 3-star units generally have very high health pools, you can do some cool stuff with this. So be on the lookout for that. But like I said, this item cleaves pretty hard and can do a lot of damage. When I first ran sims with this, with the numbers that they gave me that are in that article, and I saw it put it on Senna, it was like, oh, nearly. So let us know what you think. But yeah. All right, a couple other changes. As I mentioned, Anima Visage is removed. No problem. Lichbane. Lichbane's been kind of underperforming for a while, and like we have a bunch of blue buff users in this set that don't want Lichbane. That's weird. Like the entire purpose was like a blue buff. Like the fact that Yuumi doesn't want this item really, that's not great. So Lichbane is supposed to be like I cast a bunch and then big proc. So Lichbane's getting buffed. Mogul's Mail has been underperforming a bit, so that's also getting a small buff here from 7 to 10 HP per stack. Okay, Wit's End. This buff might be confusing, but you'll notice it's gaining 300 HP and 30 armor. The challenge was when we looked at Static Shiv, which is about being on a ranged champion like Kog'Maw in the back and doing a bunch of procs, and then Wit's End, it's like they're kind of similar. They kind of have the very same similar space where it's like high attack speed and then damage on hit. So what we decided to do is that Static Shiv is the better ranged version, right? If you have your Pikachu Zayas or your Twisted Fates or your Kog'Maws, Static Shiv is going to be the better item. Wit's End is now designed to be on your melee bruisers that want to attack fast. And so the best example on this set would be Kobuko. Kobuko should love this item, right? Because he's going to get 300 HP, 30 armor, 30 MR, the attack speed, and that Omnivamp that he's getting from the thing, as well as the on-hit damage. And so that should be the difference. That's going to be the core design here. Wit's End on a backliner won't be as good because you kind of be wasting some of his defensive stats. It won't be quite as much damage as Static Shiv. I think it could still work, but that's kind of the intention, and that's why this is getting those stats. Finally, on the support item side, again, some of this is getting ready for the next set, but Spite has been underperforming for a while. No one's excited to get Spite, and so rather than have Spite be this awkward low roll, we're just going to get rid of it for now so that you can't low roll and you don't feel like you just have a bad support item. So, and there you go. Item changes first this patch, like I said, decent chunk of them. But overall, the actual impact to the meta, like if you're somebody who's like, okay, but what does this do to change the meta? It should do very little. That is the goal. And in fact, one of our other big goals for this was like, if somebody didn't read the patch notes and they just start playing the game, they'll barely notice, right? They'll build Static Shiv when they thought, and they'll get a Void Staff, but it'll do the same thing. They'll build Ginsu's, and it'll be pretty dang similar. So that's kind of the hope. Let us know how that lands. But yeah. All right, let's talk about the actual patch changes now. First off, on encounters. We have a couple changes on the opening encounters. Nothing too major here. First off is the 2-star 2-cost opener. We tried it. We had some fun with it. We figured out, if it was going to be good or not. Overall, the answer is we didn't think it landed as well as we'd hoped. And so we're just disabling it. We're turning it off. The impact of having a start that was different than somebody else was just more than I think we were comfortable with. Even at a casual level, it's just like if you got a 2-star 2-cost you weren't comfortable with and you felt like you had to play it, but if you sold it, it felt bad. So we're going to disable this one. To split or not to split. We actually like this encounter. It's a fine encounter, but unfortunately there's a couple bugs with it, and we couldn't get the bugs fixed in time for this patch. So rather than just leave it buggy, we decided to disable it for now. We may fix it, we may not, to be honest with you. We're kind of getting ready for the next set. But if we do, cool, we'll re-enable it. But it's not a bad encounter by any means. Obviously, because we disabled some, we had to put percentages back in others. So 4th augment is going to go up a bit at all levels. Invested, this is the one where there's a pool and you either choose to increase it or cash out. That one's going up a little bit. Prismatic Opener, Prismatic Finale, and Crabgrave, all of those going up ever so slightly, just to, again, get it back up to 100% to take up all the ones we took out. So not a big deal. Last small change here is that the Golem Armory, if you take the tank one, which is pretty much the most popular choice, although a lot of people liking the new RNG Golem, so we're really glad that landed well. But their Anima Visage is now an Indomitable. So if anything, I think this is a slight buff, but we'll see. We'll see. So tank Golem now can grab people. Neat. All right. On the trait side, Anima Squad. Anima Squad is a really interesting comp where it's like you have to kind of like hit it in the right spot, and it can do really well. It performs pretty decently. The one part we really didn't like where it was doing well, though, was like the early game, the 3-piece. It's like if you have a 3-piece Anima start, it just didn't quite have the oomph we were hoping for. If you get like a 5 Anima very quickly, then from there it goes crazy and you're good to go. So the 3-piece weapons are each going to do about 10% more damage. This will last, like, so if you're playing 7, when the 3-piece weapons fire, they are doing 10% more damage. So this is a buff to Anima overall. So it is a very small buff, but that part of the kit will be doing a little bit more. Again, should be really minor and mostly focused on the early game. Amp. Amp is doing pretty well. I think, when we prepared the patch, things like Nefuri and Amp were popping off pretty hard. I think overall they're like in an okay spot. So this nerf may not have been necessary overall, but for now, 5 Amp is just such a big spike over 4 Amp that we felt like we liked the damage part of it being amped up. That's good. But the HP just felt like a little much. So we're taking 100 HP off of 5 Amp. Shouldn't be too noticeable. 6 Boombot, same thing, overperforming ever so slightly. I mean, it should. It's a hard to hit comp, but just a little bit. So very tiny nerf here to just 6 Boombot. 7 Exotech. This is a comp that, unfortunately, of all of our verticals right now, like Street Demon's pretty playable, Anima's pretty playable. Exotech 3 and 5 are very useful, but 7, not so much. You don't really see a lot of 7 Exotech. So we're going to give that a little bit more attack speed per item and some more health to make Exotech a little bit better. Rapid Fire. I think this is another debatable nerf. Obviously, long Renekton is kind of the thing that really succeeds here, which is known, but we do have to balance around that. And 6 Rapid Fire was always something that we had over-buffed to get people to try it. It's like, whenever a comp doesn't work, you can bribe enough people with power, and then they'll optimize it and figure out, and it's like, okay, now that's been optimized, here's the approximate level it should be. So we are giving 6 Rapid Fire a very tiny nerf. I do understand that this is pretty tied to Renekton, but it kind of makes sense because 6 Rapid Fire is usually an emblem anyway, and so you're usually going to play Renekton, and that's just the way it is. So Techie, another example where Techies are close. They're not bad by any means, but we just want to make sure that 6 and 8 Techie are options that you can play. And so 6 is going to get 5 more AP, 7's going to get, or 8's going to get 10 more AP. Small buffs. That's it on the trait side. So, like I said, not a lot changing. On the champion side, Nitro is just underperforming a little bit, which, again, I know that's crazy because there are definitely some good Nitro games out there, but overall it's just a little too hard to play. And so we're going to focus on giving Kindred a little bit more AD so that you can play her a little bit more in the early game. We're also hoping this helps like an early Marksman combo or an early Rapid Fire combo and make Kindred feel like a little bit more useful in the comp. So 2 more AD. Again, 2 AD is so tiny. And then only 3-star spell buffs so that if you actually invest in her at 3-star, it feels good. And then Amp was we talk about Amp and how it caps out well, but Amp's early game is pretty rough. And Nidalee is a champion that like very few people are ever excited to itemize her. So we're giving her a 10% spell buff. Now the thing to note here is this is only the core spell, not the Chain Lightning. So it's not even a 10% buff to all of her damage. It's just that like initial bite on the primary target. So overall, it's a smaller nerf than it looks like, or smaller buff than it looks like. But Nidalee should be a little bit better. And so these two things hopefully will help Nitro comps and early Amp comps and things like that in the early game. Speaking of which, on the 1-cost side, we went through and there were just a few 3 stars that were underperforming and people don't really seem to be that excited to hit. And in addition, that also buffs their 4-star version. So if you ever get them with like Worth the Wait or something. So Alistar, Kog'Maw, Vi, and Seraphine are all getting buffs at 3-star. Alistar, it's like a little bit less, flat damage reduction. You'll barely notice this. Kog'Maw is going to get a little bit more spell AD when he transforms. Vi is going to get a little bit bigger of a shield. And Seraphine is just going to do a very small amount of damage here. And you can see 585 to 600. That's only 15. That's, again, so minor. We're not looking to swing hard here, but it just little touch. All right, 2-cost side. This is probably where the biggest batch of changes are. Graves is, I think, right now, I would call him the worst champ in the set after Stage 2. Very playable Stage 2. Love him in Stage 2. Quite good. Falls off kind of off a cliff, though. So what we're going to do is we're going to give him 5 more AD. Now, this will make him better in Stage 2, so watch out. He'll be a monster. And if you 3-star him, he'll do a little bit more damage. I'll be honest with you, I don't think this moves the needle enough, but we got to go light here. You never know sometimes, and we don't want to, like, all of a sudden have Graves in every early game dominating everything. So Graves is going to get a bit of a buff, paired with a few other things later. LeBlanc, kind of similar. There's like one LeBlanc comp that works, and it usually involves Mana Zane. We don't want her to be so tied to that exact option, so she's going to get a bit of a spell damage buff here. She's one of those champions that right now just does not see much play. Vayne is has fallen off pretty hard, so she's not that great. And in addition, she was somebody who usually played double Ginsus. She's one of the biggest people who kind of got hit with the double Ginsus. Now, hopefully she can make up some of that with maybe an item like Kraken or just in general, but we're going to give her back some of that starting mana she lost previous patches, so she'll be able to cast more often and do some of the more of that true damage. Again, light swings. My guess is Vayne actually might need a little more, but we also didn't want to go too crazy with like the Anima Squad openers here, so we had to be careful. Veigar, this is an interesting one. Veigar's always had very weird scaling. If you notice, most of our champions, when their spell scales, it goes up 50%. If you followed our normal frameworks, 1-star Veigar should do 320, and 2-star should do 480. That would be our normal framework. But the problem is, because Veigar has so much of his kit built into the true damage that he does, we have to kind of account for that, and so he ends up getting to do a little bit less damage at each star level. That being said, Veigar is okay when you get him in the exact right spot, but he's not really like an awesome star. He's a little too hard to play for what we want him to be. So we are going to give him some of that damage back at 2 and 3-star. So this will make Veigar a little bit more playable. And then finally, Rengar. Rengar was a beast in those first couple patches, got a couple subsequent nerfs, has kind of been struggling. Even when his second patch heyday, it was more of a Jinx comp than a Rengar comp. That being said, we're going light here. We don't need to give him a bunch of healing back or anything like that. So he's just going to get 2 AD. So very light buff. And again, we're hoping that Graves plus Rengar together might make some Executioner openers a little bit more playable. So we'll see. All right, 4 and 5 cost. Not a lot of changes here. Cho'Gath is only getting nerfed at 3-star. He is the best 3-star 4 cost. The dirty secret, by the way, if you dig into the stats, is that he's actually outperforming Samira 3-star. Which isn't great. He's kind of really freaking good. So we are nerfing him slightly. It is fun when he's good, but he's a little too good. Leona, kind of been the cornerstone of a lot of comps here. And again, we talk about Anima Squad. We talk about Vanguard Marksman. Leona's just kind of carrying a lot of weight by herself. So we went with the lightest nerf possible we could. We like her spell. We like that she's really, really tanky. Just increase that window of vulnerability ever so slightly. So... Ziggs is getting not buffed, but I think, as Froden would say, there's a potential green sentence here. You'll see some of that in the bugs later. But basically, have you ever had that experience where you throw a Ziggs bomb and then it bounces and then it keeps bouncing and then keeps bouncing and you're like, what the heck's going on? And then it finally goes off and you're like, what? I've even had a situation where I had the Ziggs bomb was still bouncing and he went to throw another bomb. It's a little much. So we did some work in here, and we're going to kind of clean up Ziggs. You'll see it more in the bug fixes as well. But overall, Ziggs should feel snappier. His spell should feel like it hits when it's supposed to and hits the number of targets it should. We're not increasing his numbers at all, not increasing his mana cost. He'll still do about the same amount of damage. He'll just avoid some really crappy situations. The intention is this should just feel better, but not actually be a power increase. But you never know with these things. There have been times where we changed an animation speed and all of a sudden the champ's OP. I don't think that's the case here, but just calling it out as a slight warning. 5 costs, Aurora. Aurora 2-star was underperforming just a little bit. I know that's crazy because right now, so when we prepared this patch, this was true. We've seen a bit of a shift, especially because like Aurora caps out the Dynamo comps, like the Morgana Bastion and things like that. But even in those comps, usually you can get away with Morgana 1 because Morgana 1's kind of doing everything she needs to do. It wasn't really capping around Aurora 2, and it wasn't making enough of a difference. So we went with a very slight buff here because, again, the way Aurora's spell is she hits everybody for this amount and then splits another much larger amount. So that larger amount isn't being buffed at all. It's only this initial damage. So she should be able to do a bit more at Aurora 2, and you should feel better about hitting a 2-star 5 cost because they're supposed to be good. So, cool. All right, that's it for champions. Like I said, not a lot. Augments, not a lot in the augment space. 1,000 IQ or 10,000 IQ. Our buff worked. This augment's very good. A little too good. So, gold rewards going from 8 to 4. Board of Directors. This has been another augment that's been really, really good. Things like Morgana, Vex, etc. Little too good. So we're going to lower the base stat increase from 75 to 60. Remember, it gets 10% per stage, so it does keep going up. But overall, little nerfed here. Category 5, removed because there's no Hurricane. Anger Issues, removed because it's not really exciting anymore with the way Ginsu's worked before, and it was already a black market augment anyway. So Anger Issues, also gone. Lifelong Learning, this is another black market augment that's been a little below, slight buff. Shock Treatment, Static Shiv's not a core item anymore, removed. Again, another black market augment gone. Unstable Evolution, very slight buff here. And then Wise Spending, this one's interesting. I'll be honest with you, Wise Spending 2 patches ago was a very, very good augment, and it was you would get 2 XP per 1 reroll. We nerfed it to 3 XP per 2 rerolls. So essentially we went from 2 to 1.5 XP per reroll. It became a dumpster tier augment, like really, really bad. And we debated all the different things we could do of it, it being like 7 XP per 3 rolls or something, like, trying to get it to be a little bit better. But we really didn't like any of that. So we're going to try this version. So now it's XP per 2 rerolls 4. So it's back to basically 2 XP per reroll. So if logic follows, it should be just as strong as it was before. This should be a very powerful augment. We want to confirm that to be 100% to see if that's the case, or if this like having to reroll twice to get the XP actually hurts it. And then we'll go from there. Now keep in mind it's a black market augment anyway, so worst case scenario, next patch we disable it. But just calling it out here that like the last nerf had a massive impact on this, and this is kind of undoing it almost. So be aware that Wise Spending should be pretty good. So, and then bug fixes. Ziggs Bomb, so this is the thing I was talking about with Ziggs, will now only bounce to a new location if it would hit 0 targets. When it does bounce, it will now bounce on top of the closest enemy instead of to a hex within Ziggs' attack range. So again, this is basically just making it so if it only bounces if it's only going to miss completely, and then getting it there quick. We also fixed a bug where Ziggs' bomb could fizzle if he died before it exploded. We also fixed a bug where Ziggs' bomb double damage clause would come into effect based on the number of targets in his plus shape when the missile was thrown rather than when it was exploded. So overall, bit of a slight rework here, but again, the goal here is power neutral, snappier, and better. That was what a lot of our bug fixing time went towards. And then BRB, AFK, and delayed start are now all exclusive from each other. That caused some issues. So, and there you go. That's it. Like I said, not a giant patch. When you look at it in all totality, like we're not changing a ton of the champs and traits. I think a lot of people, especially right now, if you're coming off the current live patch, you're sort of going, well, where's the Morgana nerfs? Where's the Bastion nerfs? But overall, at the highest level, what we're seeing is a lot of versatility. We don't think there are comps that are going out of line. If anything, what we're seeing is like, as some more reroll comps have become playable, there are people that are sort of like, they get extra frustrated when reroll comps are playable. And trust me, if they were out of line, we would nerf them. But right now, that's just not what we're seeing. And so no changes to anything like that. Now, one other call out here before I wrap this up is that if you're somebody who likes Remix Rumble and you're like, are there any Remix Rumble changes? The answer is yes. Actually, the team who works on our set revivals have got a bunch of patch changes ready. I didn't feel like it would be appropriate to go through them as that team worked on them. I don't have full context on them. They'll be in the patch notes, but just let it be known that We have just as many people working on these set revivals so that you guys enjoy them and have fun with them. And so there are buffs and nerfs. So shout out to the team that really did that. And so if you're having fun, just let it be known you're getting some changes as well, so that the set revival meta can be as good as possible. So there you go. That's it for the patch rundown. One last thing I wanted to note for anyone who watches this. I mentioned previously that I was taking a step back from extra stuff. I did for about 3 weeks. It gave me some time to reflect and think about my approach and the way I was doing things. And what I did is I did kind of a reevaluation of like what things I really, really liked about streaming and doing all the extra stuff and what things I didn't. And I'm going to be doing a big focus to cut out the things that I didn't enjoy, and I'm just not going to do those anymore. So this is be interacting on things like Twitter and Reddit. I'm going to be more focused on like the streaming, as well as like my Discord will have some stuff. You'll see like a new fun morning podcast thing I do for myself that I really, really like. It's again, mostly just for me because I enjoy it. So if you want to interact with me there, as well as I'm going to be streaming every weekend, but if I feel like taking time off, I just will. I'll take a breather or change my focus. Just really trying to take a healthier approach with the goal of, when I said I was taking a step back, I got a lot of support, frankly, more than I deserve. And I just want to make sure that to all the people who do support me, you guys are the ones that get my attention, that you guys are the ones that get the focus and the things we're going to talk about and keeping TFT great and entertainment. So yeah, cool. Don't want to dive on that too much here, but just wanted to let that be known. I know this video gets more views, so if you're curious what's happening, that's what's happening. So yeah. All right, cool. That's going to do it for me. Hope you guys enjoy. Patch will be out on, I believe, Wednesday. It's there's a holiday in the US, so it could be Thursday, but all the schedule stuff says Wednesday. So, but just be warned, if it's not on Wednesday and it ends up being Thursday, that's why. But schedule still says Wednesday. I'll let you know if that's not the case. So cool. All right, that's going to do it for me. Hope you guys enjoy. Patches, new items, good stuff as we build towards the next set. And yeah, cool. All right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.